Hi there. Welcome to another episode of the TED in Your Head podcast. I'm Ted Moreno, certified hypnotherapist and high performance coach, and I help people get out of their own way. Isn't that what it comes to? Isn't it us who stops us from health, happiness, and success? We all have the potential. We all know that. We all know we're capable, or we think at least, that we're capable of accomplishing some awesome things, but they say most people are 6 inches from success, which is the distance between their two ears. So it's our head, it's our thinking, it's our beliefs that keep us from the things that we want. And if you have an idea that you're getting in your own way and you want to get out of your own way, I'll tell you how to get in touch with me at the end of the show. But for now, let's get into today's podcast. And I want to begin by playing a little song for you. And I'm going to play it on this cool little bamboo flute. So let's see if I can pull this off, okay? Here we go. There you go. I probably could have practiced that for many more hours till I perfected it, but you get the general tune. This is a little Japanese folk song called Sakura Sakura. It's from the late 1800s, and it's very, very popular folk tune in Japan. Sakura Sakura is about cherry blossoms. So Sakura is cherry blossom. So the song is about spring and the season of the cherry blossoms. So the symbolism of sakura, or cherry blossom, is deeply rooted in the culture of Japan. This is because it symbolizes the transient nature of life as well as the impermanence of pretty much everything. So the sakura, the cherry blossoms, they arise, they're beautiful for a brief period of time, and then they fall all too soon. So this song is a primary example of the concept of the beauty of things passing away. And of course, on a much larger scale, this song speaks to the brevity and impermanence of the life of a human being. So today, that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about life and death. Now, this has been on my mind recently because last week I went to 2 funerals. One was for the funeral of someone who was 97 years old, and the other one was a funeral for someone who was 42 years old. So it really brought home the idea that we want to live a long, full life, but we may not. We simply don't know when our life is going to end. Now, when I talk about death, notice how you feel hearing that word. Does it make you feel scared, anxious, uncomfortable, sad, depressed? If so, then that might suggest that there may need to be some work you need to do as far as your relationship with death. I think it's good to accept our mortality, to accept death in the same way that we accept that day turns into night. I definitely think that one of the most powerful things we can do is to come to terms with our own mortality, to accept the fact not only of our own death, but of those that we love and cherish. Now, this is really triggering you. This is really difficult to hear. If you're really struggling to hear what I have to say to you today, then please stop listening to this podcast. This message is not going to be for everyone, particularly for those that are really struggling emotionally with grief or loss, or for people that are struggling with basic mental instability at this point in your life. I totally understand. I respect that. So if you're having problems listening to this, then by all means, turn off this podcast. But if this conversation sounds somewhat interesting to you, then I suggest that you go back and listen to a podcast that I did in November of 2024. This was episode 462, titled Remember What You Don't Want to Think About, Memento Mori. Remember, you will die. So I kind of introduced the concept a little bit. So you might ask, well, Ted, why are you talking about it again? Why should we remember that we're going to die? Well, I think it's because there is no life without death. And there's no real living without acknowledging that it will all be done too soon. There's a great Neil Diamond song called Done Too Soon. Kind of dating myself. This is way back in the 70s. Check it out, Done Too Soon. You know, from the moment we're born, we have a relationship with death, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. And I would suggest to you that life is all the more precious if we can acknowledge this and be mindful of it. Doing so can give us a grand perspective of one's life, because we live in the certainty that tomorrow will be there, but it may very well not be. Today may be the last day that we walk on this earth. Certainly that's a possibility. I lost my brother back in October. Healthy guy. Went out for a mountain bike ride. Dropped dead. Fully expected to have him with me indefinitely into the future. That wasn't to be. And we don't need to be afraid of that fact. It doesn't need to make us depressed or anxious or fearful, even though it may now. I think it's possible to work through this relationship with our life and our death to the point where it becomes a simple fact, yet an empowering fact. I think back to when I was about 5 or 6 years old. I don't know why, but I approached my mother and I said, "Mom, am I going to die?" And she said, "Yes, we're all going to die." And I broke down in tears. And I said, "I don't want to die. I don't want to die." I was crying. I was almost inconsolable. And to her credit, she held me in her lap and she rocked me back and forth. And she said, "It's okay. It's going to be a long time. You don't need to worry about that right now." And for some reason or other, that experience left me accepting that fact and not really having a problem with it. You know, I've always been able to talk about it, think about it, discuss it, when in fact it made a lot of other people uncomfortable. So I credit my mother for just being honest and truthful with me, because I walked away from that like being okay with the whole idea. I think the greatest fear that we have as human beings is the fear of non-existence, which is what the fear of death is. But it's not just the fear of death, it's the fear of loss of who we think we are. So when we lose a relationship, that's a type of death, a type of non-existence. That part of us no longer exists. It's the same way when we lose a beloved pet or someone that is dear or important to us, a friend, family, relative, family member. We ask ourselves, who am I? Who am I without this relationship? Who am I without this pet? It's almost like a little piece of who we are dies. And so now we're talking about the ego, right? The ego is our belief in who we are. It's a story we tell ourselves about who we are. All the details, all the memories, and it's the construction of who we are. It's a description of who we are, and it's very much a creation, right? In many ways, it's a fiction. Our ego, our thoughts and feelings about who we are. Remember that the ego's primary goal is to maintain its existence, to maintain itself. So the ego, our idea of who we are and everything we think about ourselves, it will fight to maintain its existence. The ego does not want to die. And any type of loss triggers that sense of non-existence. Once we lose the fear of death, however, I think life becomes sweeter. We can lose that existential dread that so many of us seem to carry around. Then we're free to enjoy life in the best way possible. And this fear of non-existence, this fear of death, is pervasive in our culture. We come up with all kinds of different words. Instead of saying he died, he passed. He's gone on to a greater place, right? We have all these euphemisms because we want to avoid the directness of that fact. And so consequently in our lives, we're trying to make our lives longer. We're trying to escape growing old. There's many ways that we can keep ourselves looking younger. And I'm sure that eventually they'll have technologies that will allow us to live even longer. And that's fine. That's fine. But it's worth thinking about our death as well as our life. And this is why meditation can be such a helpful practice, because meditation gives us some distance from our thoughts about ourselves. So meditation, in a way, and it does take practice and time, allows us to get some detachment, not only from our own egos, but from our own lives. Does that make sense? There's a Buddhist practice. It's a Buddhist meditation that is called Maranasati. Maranasati, or mindfulness of death. It's a meditation technique designed to increase awareness of mortality and encourage living in the present moment. Now, I've never done this meditation. I've heard of it. I've read about it. It sounds pretty intense. You start with imagining your own death, and then you imagine your body being buried and decaying. I mean, it's not for everyone. But the practice is not about dwelling on fear or negativity, but it's about cultivating mindfulness and acceptance of the natural cycle of life. Things arise, things fall. Breath comes in, breath goes out. Day breaks, day goes away as night takes over. The wonderful explosion of life, which is spring, becomes the fullness of summer, which eventually turns into winter, when everything goes dormant and everything looks dead, and then it begins all over again, right? Somebody dies, somebody is born. So I think stepping back and getting a better idea, a better perspective of that can be very, very liberating. Look up death meditation on Wikipedia. You can read about it and get the real details about it if you're willing to do that. It's very interesting. So the idea is that this type of mindfulness or meditating on these things allows us to have greater compassion, because we realize that everybody, all humans are in the same boat. We all have the same fears. We all struggle with the same things, essentially. And this can allow us to have less attachment to the world and to the material things of the world, and a greater appreciation for our life here and now. Again, this is not for everyone, this topic or these type of meditations. To fully accept this inevitable stage of our life does require that we have worked through some of our own experiences of grief or loss, which is a journey on its own, of course. And that journey is a difficult journey to take. So, we have to be okay. We have to be in that okay place of having worked through our own feelings of loss and grief before we really tackle, I think, this idea of our own mortality. And if you're on that journey, certainly I'm available to help support you. So I'm going to leave you with the idea that freedom, true freedom, is the ability to be free from the past and free from the future. And I mean specifically free from thoughts about the past and free from thoughts about the future, and to be fully, wholly, and powerfully able to experience this present moment, so that the time that you do have, whatever time that is not only meaningful, but as good as you can make it. And I would suggest to you that people come to me for one reason and one reason only, and that's freedom. To be free from negative thoughts, feelings that they don't want, habits that they don't want, memories or emotional attachment that they don't want. So really, we're all looking for freedom, the ability to be free to live our lives with happiness, with intention, and with a feeling like of safety and that everything's going to be okay, that the universe has got our back. And I do believe that it does. So if these are interesting things, and you have ideas or comments or thoughts about these things, please feel free to leave a comment on Instagram. I always post these podcasts on Instagram, not the podcast, but the description. Of course, you can go to tedmoreno.com/blog and read the text to this podcast. You're welcome to leave a comment there. And if you go to YouTube, at Ted A. Moreno at youtube.com, you can watch these podcasts on YouTube. And of course, feel free to leave a comment or message there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this particular subject. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm trying out different ways to make this podcast not only more interesting for me, but for you as well. And I always appreciate your comments. And most of all, I appreciate you listening and being here now. So take good care of yourself. Enjoy the day. And we'll talk soon. Bye now.